I am here, Amanda is here, Jim is here, Carol is here, and Linda is absent. I hear a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bender, second by Ms. Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4 ayes, 1 absent. You got any comments from her?
No, we don't.
I will dispense with the statement. Student expulsion hearing 09/18/19, action for violation of Education Code 48900 A2, 48900K. In addition, 48915B1, which states due to the nature of the violation, other means of correction are not feasible and have repeatedly failed to bring about proper conduct. Do I hear a motion? Oh, to expel and suspend the expulsion order with conditions.
I make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Bender,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Sanchez. All in favor?
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Hiring resignations on personnel items. Do we have any questions?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I just want to talk about Colleen Dietrich and Lori Barton. They've been in my district for many years, and it's just, I see that they're retiring, and I just want to thank them for their service. We'll miss them. So make a motion to accept the personnel items.
Motion by Ms. Sanchez. Mr.
Second.
Bender? Ms. Robinson, all in favor?
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 absent. Second interim report. Mr. Aaron. I can't hear that name from you, Mr. Aaron.
So, second interim presentation. Second interim covers what's occurred during this fiscal year up until January 31st, 2019. So everything between July and January. These numbers are going to be pretty small. If you have a hard time seeing it, I recommend you get a copy. I put them up there. So, second interim, local educational agencies, which we are required to file interim reports, first and second interim. So the first interim we already did, that covered up to October 31st. The second interim covers up to July 31st. This kind of explains the certification of the interim reports. There's a positive possibility. Positive means you have your reserve requirements. For us, that would be 3% of our operating expenditures. Qualified means you can make your bills this year, but you possibly can't make it in the 2 subsequent years. And negative, which we currently are, negative certification. That means we cannot make our operation expenditures this year. So it's kind of a busy reporting cycle. It's non-stop throughout the year. We're right here, the second interim report. So in January, the governor came out with his budget. Second interim, what we found out was this budget may not be very accurate in terms of how the economy is doing. The legislative analyst office has already come out and said, don't plan your budget based on what was explained to everyone in January through the governor's budget. So our second interim is based on what we know, basically cost of living increases, which is law for LCFF. So it's not assuming we're going to get any more money. third interim report is something that's required if you're in a negative status school district, which we are. So that will be done before the next budget is brought to the board for 18-19, or 19-20. So as I was explaining, it's kind of small. These are actuals. So actuals mean what money has come in and what money has gone out. Actual cash going out. It's not budget. This is what's actually occurred. As of January 31st, 2019. So our expenses are kind of broken down by these general categories. Certificated salaries, that'd be teachers, speech pathologists, psychologists. Classified, that'd be the staff, support staff on site. The benefits for both certificated and classified. Supplies, operating expenditures, things like the power bills or the water bills. Equipment, things like buses, and the total. So this first column, 17-18, is what we spent last year up to this point, January 31st. 18-19 is what we spent this year up to January 31st. So up to second interim, what has actually been spent. So this year, we've been able to spend less in every single category compared to last year. 5.5% less in certificated salaries, 13% less in classified. Benefits have only gone down 1.3%, and that's due to increased pension costs and health and welfare costs. Supplies have gone down considerably, 56%. Our operating expenditures have gone down 15%. Equipment, 85%, because of we did not purchase buses, we actually purchased engines. Total expenditures for the year compared to last year are 10% lower than they were. So $2.5 million less than we spent last year at the same time. So now we're going to talk about actual budget. So not actually what's occurred, but what we're budgeting will occur. So these are basically projections, or best guesses. Our original budget is what we brought last June and what was board approved. Our board approved operating budget is what was done at the first interim. Actuals to date are what we just went over in the previous slide. Projected year totals, second interim numbers. So this is what we want to approve tonight. The difference is between projected year and board approved operating budget. So between first and second interim. So you'll notice there's not a lot of difference other than other state revenues in terms of the revenue that we're receiving. LCFF is our main state resource. So there's not much difference, maybe a rounding error. That's based on no new information coming from the state about getting more resources. And we're using P2 ADA, so we're funded on ADA. P2 of 17-18 ADA was 3,228 ADA, I believe. So that's the only number we're allowed to use to project. So if we have a higher ADA this year, and we'll know that next month, then we could use that when we're closing out our books. But until that time, we have to use the P2 information. Other state revenues, you'll notice, took a 15% increase. That's due to grants. Those are one-time grants. We don't expect to get those money again. So low-performing block grant, classified school safety training, and Title IV make up the difference for that $290,000. Those grants are specific to our spending. We can't spend on anything other than what that grant is for. Gets a little smaller. Our expenditures. So again, our original, what we approved last June, our board approved the first interim, what's actually happened. Projected year totals is what we're saying, second interim revisions, the difference, and the difference as a percentage. So our biggest costs obviously are salaries, health and welfare benefits. Salaries have gone up a little over first interim. That's just due to the needs that have arisen, whether it's needing to hire one-on-one aides or if there's a need, we've had to fill it. That's the increase in salaries. Benefits did go down a little, $36,000. Books and supplies did go up, $53,000 in expenditures. Operating expenditures did go down. That was due to, we had a stale dated warrant that was issued 5 years ago to RCSD for close to $50,000. It was just basically sitting in our account and nothing was ever done with it. So we applied that expenditure and we offset our costs. And this was working with the county. Usually if you have a stale dated warrant, after a couple of years you submit that to the state. When we researched this stale dated warrant, we really had no idea why it was ever issued in the first place. So we were able to use those funds to offset our current year expenditures. Capital outlay, those were the engines we purchased. And other, that would be money that comes in or goes out of Fund 1 to other funds. Multi-year projections. So multi-year is what determines what our reserves are for this year and the subsequent 2 years. So this is the current year, this is next fiscal year, and this is the second subsequent fiscal year. You'll notice basically, and these are budget numbers, these are not actual. What we're assuming for revenues is $40.5 million. Next year, the only increase we'll see is COLA, which is 3.4%. That's cost of living increase for LCFF. So there's no increase other than that. This negative amount you see, that's one-time funds from the state that we will not, that the state has not allocated for next year. So we can't expect to get it. So no one-time fund. The only increase is cost of living. So there's not much of an increase. And we have to assume everything will stay the same. We can't assume anything more than what legislation is, and legislation says 3.4% for next year. The same thing for the 2021 fiscal year. Cost of living, 2.21% for LCFF. And this is assuming ADA stays flat. So if ADA were to drop, we would be held harmless for next year, and then the following year we would get whatever ADA we have in 1920 for 2021. So if ADA stays the same, this is what we would receive. If ADA were to increase, we would definitely see a bump in our revenue. So you can see it's just flat for the next 2 years based on the best information we have. So cost of living is the only thing we can count on. ADA that we use, 3,228.27. That's basically what the state funds us on. And again, the reduction in one-time funds here, until the state comes out and says we're going to allocate one-time funds, we can't count on it. Yeah. I don't know why it's so small. This doesn't look so small on my screen. So, and I was just sitting really close. So multi-year expenditures. This is just budget. So the first column is our current fiscal year, the second column is next fiscal year, and the third column is the subsequent fiscal year. Everything is relatively flat. What you'll notice is the RIFs are factored into here that were passed recently, the classified as certificated RIFs. That is the reduction that you'll notice for both certificated and classified. Health and welfare, you'll notice, does take a bump. That's because counselors and CalPERS are raising their rates next year considerably, 2 to 3% for both. And that's a cost we cannot pass on, we have to pay that. Also, health and welfare, we're projecting between 5 and 8% increase in cost. We'll know on Friday, CISC will release their new rates. There is a cap on health and welfare, but we do have a substantial amount of employees that have chosen health and welfare plans that are below that cap. So anything up to that cap, we still pay. So that will factor into the increase in health and welfare. You'll see a bump in services and operating expenditures. That's Prop 39 spending. We plan on doing that in the summer. That's money that if we don't use that, we have to return it. It's almost $800,000 in energy efficiency work. So we plan on doing that in the summertime. You'll see it's not in the 2021 budget, it's removed. And those are restricted funds, we can only use it for that purpose. So the bottom line here, the total between expenditures, or the total sum, it's hard to see. 37, we have $41 million budgeted for this year, 37 million for next year, and 37 million for 2021.
So that's the bottom there is some good news for us. The bottom figure there, the 3.5 million.
Yeah, the fund balance I'll get to right now. So multi-year projections, again, is what we base our fund balance on. Our planning factors included the reduction in force that was approved, the benefit increases, cost of benefits, that includes retiree benefits, CalSTRS, CalPERS increases, as well as health and welfare increases. 3% is what we're looking for. 3% reserve is what we're looking for. So we won't have a 3% this year. We'll have well below that. Next year, we won't reach that 3% threshold. We'll be in the negative $1.5 million number. But that third year out, we do meet that 3%, and we'll have a 6% reserve. We're projecting a 6% reserve, basically. So double what the state average is, what the state requirement is. For us, the state requirement is 1.4 million. We're projecting a reserve of around 2.5 million.
This is calculating for the 30 classified that we're planning to do in the reduction of force.
Both RIFs are in there.
Both routes.
And what's the 88% that you're basing this off of? Is it 91%, 98%?
It's whatever the P2 was, which I believe was like 94%. And yeah, we are seeing, we think 88 will be better than P2, but we can't use a higher number until
And I
P2 is
understand that,
actually
but my
completed.
concern is we were budgeting on 98%, and we have 91%, and that's why we're in, part of the reason why we're in what we're in, from what I've been told in the past. So I almost feel that we should go more conservative on our budget, and yay, we have money in, rather than, oh, no, we don't have money. But that's what you guys did before.
Not 98, no, that would be impossible.
Well,
95 would be a safe number.
but isn't that what you budgeted for last year?
98, no.
I think it was 110.
Well, because I remember a 98 being said at a meeting, and then you said, oh, yeah, we only made 91%.
For 98%, 88, that would not be.
I understand completely what you're saying, and I agree, but that's not what was reported to us at a meeting.
I would not remember 98.
Well,
But the good thing about
$2
using
million, so.
the good thing about using P2, we're held harmless. So if our 88 does come in below that, we're guaranteed to at least get what we received at P2.
And when is that B2, what month is it due?
Mid-April.
Mid-April?
So the cutoff is mid-April, and then we could work on calculating that after that.
Okay, so I'm new here. What is the P2 about?
P2, so P1,
What does it
P2, the state releases software that calculates average daily attendance. P1 would be your first time that you calculate it, that's sometime in October. And then P2 is what you're actually funded on. And that's all the educational days and all You have to calculate basically all the possible days and what attendance has been for those days.
That's
And
where
that-
they came up with the 32,280.
Yeah, that's the ADA,
And that's for the year 17-18.
correct. The
Yeah.
P2, because P2 is the official number that we're funding on. P1 for this year did come in higher than P2 of last year, but traditionally, P2 has always been lower than P1. So,
And we're using them figures from 2017 and 18, and we're saying that they're gonna be, our projected revenue is, that's what it's gonna be for that, what we're projecting for 19, 20, and 21
based on P2 for last
of
year. Yeah.
2017, 18.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the trend throughout the state is lower ADA, just because there's fewer children going to school. That has been the trend throughout the state, up and down. We have experienced increased enrollment and attendance. We're kind of an outlier in that sense. Very few districts have grown over the last few years. We have increased our enrollment this year, but not very substantially. So looking at P1, we're pretty optimistic that we'll have a better P2 number than we did last year. But it's not going to be enough to make up our deficit. Yeah. So even 50 students would be a substantial number. But it all count. At the end of the day, we can't count on it until we actually submit it to the state.
Our multi-year projection you have for 19 and 20 of 40,874,000. Our multi-projection fund balance is, or let's go back to the projection expenses. You have 37. I mean, that's a difference of 3,500,000. But when you go all done here, you only have a difference of 1,100,000. How do we lose $2 million there?
It's making up for the deficit we have right now.
Okay, so we're paying that back.
Yeah. We do have considerable operating surpluses next year. So that will go towards paying back our borrowing.
And what is our borrowing again?
Currently, we're at $2 million
That we borrow?
from the county. We're anticipating having to borrow up to $5 million, closing out the construction project, paying that off. And our biggest problem is cash flow. Because we don't have a reserve, our cash flow is really tight. So if we don't get that money in that month, we will have to borrow for cash flow purposes. Not because necessarily we can't make our bills, but we just don't have the reserve. We don't have the funds in time to pay our bills. So borrowing right now is being done for cash flow purposes as well. So every month we have $2.6 million in salary and benefits going out. So 2.6 plus anything else in operating expenditures. So, we need at least $3 million a month just to pay all our bills.
We're using the ADA from 2017 and 18. Was that a good figure, you think, back then?
For 17, 18?
Yeah, that's what we're basically, our projected,
That's the official number.
that's the official
That's
number.
what-
But
yeah.
was it say high compared to what we're running now? Or was it average, or was it a little low?
Based on what we were projecting
Oh.
last year?
Yeah, over, how
Well, it
long you
was
been
lower
here?
than what we projected last year,
How long you been here?
3 years.
3 years. And in your last 3 years is,
Well, the last 2 years, we grew 10% in
Okay.
enrollment.
and we're gonna go down. We're still
But
at
that didn't translate to much growth in ADA.
Okay.
So kids were enrolling, but they weren't going to school. This year, we're seeing, because we're paying more attention to attendance, we're being more proactive about reaching out to families with chronic absences. We're seeing that attendance has gone up, and the percentage is better than it was last year. But again, P2 will determine all of that. I'm optimistic we'll have a better number than we did last year, but until we could actually
That's
sit
what
down and submit it.
I would like to, if that's the number we're basing it on, and everything was pretty good, I'd like to make sure we base it on maybe a little lower number, so we're safe.
Yeah, this number is safe because the law states, even if our ADA this year is lower, the state will still fund us at this rate.
So far, huh? Is that what our new governor said?
No,
He changed his mind a couple times already.
That's LCFF.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. There are, you know, I'm optimistic, but there's always, you know, the recession, it's inevitable, it's going to happen. The last time we had a recession, we had a lot of deferrals, meaning the state basically gave us IOUs. If that were to happen again in our current fiscal state, there's no way the county would be able to support us. That is a big concern in the next 2 years. If the state were to start issuing IOUs, we would be in a lot of trouble. But that did happen last time around in 2011. So the sooner we could get to the point where we have a healthy reserve, the safer we'll be in terms of cash flow. Thank you.
And your projection is 2 years will be that.
Yes,
Okay.
hopefully sooner.
I'm holding you to that, you know that, right? I'm writing it down right now.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the filing of the second interim.
I make a motion to accept the filing of the second.
I'll second it.
Motion by Ms. Sanchez, second by Bender. Mr. Bender, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4 ayes, 1 absent.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion by Ms. Sanchez,
Second?
Ms. Robinson, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Always like to get in on that adjournment vote.
And it is
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Sorry for holding you up out there in the cold.
Do you guys want the student report?
Sure.